All right, so today we're tackling a huge name, a guy everyone thinks they know, Thomas Jefferson. You know, Declaration of Independence, champion of liberty, founding father, the whole nine yards. But um, digging into the research you gave me, it's clear there's a lot more to the story, like way more complex than the textbook version.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating, really. We think we know these historical figures, but then you peel back the layers, and it's like, whoa, didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing today. Diving deep into the hidden scandals, the tough questions, the moral dilemmas of Thomas Jefferson, slavery, political maneuvering, even his personal finances. It's all a bit messier than the heroic statues might lead you to believe.
Right, and the goal here isn't to, like, cancel him or anything. It's more about trying to understand the full picture, the good and the bad, getting a more realistic view of the man behind the myth.
Exactly. So let's start with maybe the most glaring issue, especially based on what I read in your analysis. Slavery.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the guy who wrote All Men Are Created Equal, one of the most famous lines in history. And yet he owned over 600 slaves. How do we even begin to process that?
It's a huge contradiction, and it really forces us to look critically at his legacy. I mean, how can someone who writes so eloquently about freedom and equality also own hundreds of people?
And it wasn't just about the economics of it, right? I mean, there's the whole Sally Hemings situation, which brings up even more troubling questions about power and consent. The DNA evidence pretty much confirms he fathered at least 6 children with her, starting when she was incredibly young.
Yeah, around 16 years old. And remember, she was enslaved. She wasn't in a position to say no. This wasn't a romantic relationship. It was a situation rooted in power, exploitation, and control.
Okay, so we see these contradictions in his personal life, his beliefs about freedom clashing with his actions. But did that same complexity carry over into his political life?
Oh, for sure. The election in 1800, for example, was brutal. They were slinging mud back then, just like they do now.
No kidding. I thought early American politics was all about lofty ideals and reasoned debate.
Not quite. There were accusations of dirty tricks, and Jefferson's campaign was right in the thick of it. He even worked with this journalist, James Callender, who was known for, let's say, stirring the pot. It ended up backfiring when Callender exposed the whole Sally Hemings affair.
So not exactly the picture of virtue we might imagine. And then there's his rivalry with Alexander Hamilton, which sounds like it was pretty intense.
Oh yeah, it went way beyond just disagreeing on policy. They really went after each other. Jefferson was known for supporting these attacks on Hamilton's character and policies, often behind the scenes. It's like the origin story of the partisan battles we see today.
It's amazing how much of what we deal with today has roots in those early disagreements. Okay, so moving on, even Jefferson's finances seem kind of messy. You mentioned he lived this lavish lifestyle but was constantly in debt. I always pictured him as this wealthy statesman.
Well, he was definitely part of the elite, but his lifestyle seems to have exceeded his means, which honestly is a pretty relatable problem even today. He spent a ton on Monticello, on fine wines, on European art. Basically, he liked the finer things, but it came with a price. He was in serious debt when he died, so much so that they had to sell off a lot of his property, including slaves, to settle it.
Wow, not the legacy you'd expect. And then there's the Louisiana Purchase, which is usually hailed as this brilliant move that doubled the size of the U.S. But you're saying it wasn't all smooth sailing back then?
It was definitely a turning point, but it was also controversial. Some people accused Jefferson of overstepping his authority because the Constitution didn't explicitly give the president the power to buy land. And of course, it reignited the whole debate about slavery. Expanding westward meant potentially expanding slavery, which made a lot of people very uncomfortable.
Right, so even his biggest achievements had this shadow hanging over them. And speaking of shadows, we have to talk about his views on race, which, according to your analysis, were deeply, deeply racist. I'm talking about his writings in Notes on the State of Virginia, where he argued for Black people's intellectual inferiority.
It's shocking, really, how someone so associated with the Enlightenment could hold such views. He literally used pseudoscience to justify racism and slavery, and his writings, unfortunately, had a lasting impact on American society, shaping racist ideas for generations.
It really makes you question how someone can hold such contradictory beliefs. And then there's his foreign policy, which seems like a mixed bag as well. The Embargo Act of 1807, for example, sounds like it was meant to avoid war, but ended up hurting the U.S. economy pretty badly.
Yeah, it was this attempt to pressure Britain and France economically, but it ended up backfiring. American ships couldn't trade, which led to widespread smuggling and hardship, especially in port cities. It's a classic example of how good intentions don't always translate into good outcomes.
And it seems like he wasn't afraid to get a little sneaky with foreign policy either. You mentioned some covert operations during the Barbary Wars, which is not something you typically associate with Thomas Jefferson.
It shows a different side of him, a more pragmatic, maybe even ruthless side. It sets a precedent for how the U.S. would engage in foreign policy in the future, often operating in the shadows.
It's like we're seeing the roots of modern foreign policy with all its complexities and moral gray areas. Even in his personal life, beyond Sally Hemings, there are hints of, well, let's say a less than ideal family dynamic. His wife died young, and his relationship with his daughters seems to have been pretty controlling.
It reminds us that even historical icons have personal struggles and complicated relationships. Losing his wife so young must have been devastating, and his control over his daughters' lives probably reflected the norms of the time, but it still adds to the complexity of his character.
And let's not forget his falling out with John Adams and James Madison. It seems even his closest friendships weren't immune to the political drama of the time.
It really highlights how intensely personal politics were back then. These were guys who fought side by side for independence, and yet they ended up deeply divided. It's a reminder that even the most profound shared experiences can be strained by differing visions for the future.
So after all this, we're left with this picture of Jefferson that's so much more than just the hero on a pedestal. He accomplished amazing things, there's no denying that. But there's also this dark side, this moral failing at the heart of it all. It's the legacy of slavery that's impossible to separate from his achievements.
It's a tension that continues to define his legacy, this struggle between ideals and reality. He wrote about freedom and equality while owning slaves. He championed a limited government while sometimes exceeding his authority. He was a man of contradictions, and understanding that is key to understanding his impact on American history.
And it's not just a history lesson, right? Historians, activists, and the descendants of the people he enslaved are all working to re-examine his legacy. They're bringing new perspectives, uncovering hidden truths. It's an important reminder that history is not static, it's constantly evolving.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there are multiple sides to every story, and that we need to listen to all of them to truly understand the past. Jefferson's story, with all its complexities and contradictions, forces us to confront difficult questions about our own values and beliefs. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the enduring legacy of racism, and the importance of constantly interrogating our own assumptions.
So here we are, wrapping up this deep dive into the life of Thomas Jefferson. We've seen the brilliant statesman, the flawed human being, the champion of liberty who also enslaved hundreds. It's a complicated picture, and it leaves us with a lot to think about, right?
Absolutely. It's a challenge to reconcile his achievements with his moral failings. But I think that's the point. History isn't about simple heroes and villains. It's about understanding the nuances, the contradictions, the human struggles behind the big events.
And for all of you listening out there, I think there's a powerful takeaway here. Grappling with Jefferson's contradictions can help us grapple with our own. How do we reconcile our own ideals with our actions? How do we deal with the complexities of history and the legacies of injustice that we still carry today? It's not an easy task, but it's a necessary one.
I think that's a great point to end on. We can learn so much from the past, both from its triumphs and its failures. And by engaging with these difficult questions, by listening to a variety of voices and perspectives, we can hopefully build a more just and equitable future.
And maybe, just maybe, by understanding how a figure like Thomas Jefferson could be both a visionary and a hypocrite, we can learn to be more honest with ourselves about our own complexities and work towards a better world. So, with that, I want to leave you with a final thought. If Jefferson were alive today, how would he grapple with the legacy he left behind? Would he be proud of his achievements, ashamed of his failings? Or would he simply be a product of his time, unable to fully comprehend the impact of his actions? It's something to ponder as we continue to wrestle with his complicated legacy.
That's a great question, and one that doesn't have an easy answer. It forces us to think about the limitations of our own understanding, the complexities of human nature, and the ongoing struggle for justice and equality. And ultimately, I think that's what makes history so compelling. It's not just about the past, it's about how we grapple with its legacy in the present, and how we use those insights to shape a better future.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating look into the complexities of history.
Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning. There's always more to discover.